Usually we're right
Okay, there
like
need.
that.
All right, well, hey, welcome everybody to our Monday, February the 26th, 2024 Business Board meeting. I call the meeting to order and I ask my treasurer to please call the roll.
Mrs. Snow?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Here.
Mrs. Shiver?
Here.
And Dr. Russo?
Here, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Todd. A second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Mr. Bertram?
Mrs. Snow?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shiver?
Yes.
Dr. Russo?
Yes. And I believe at this time we have the pleasure of having Valerina Stewart speak to us regarding Butler Tech. You can go up to the mic, please, and fill us in on all the good things at Butler Tech.
Thank you, Chris, Superintendent Hauser, and Randy, and my favorite board. Just want to make a quick report on Butler Tech. They continue to do awesome, marvelous things for our Middletown students here and Butler County, of course. We had 2,800 applications this year to Butler Tech, and you know, we work on a lottery system, so it's fair, open for everybody, but a lot of folks don't get in. So there's still about 1,100 students that are on the wait list. So Butler Tech's goal continues to be to open more opportunities so that we can serve more kids. The aviation program is moving, our project is moving right along, so we're getting that up and running. Really excited about that. And they've got some great things going on at Butler Tech. So I just encourage the parents and encourage the kids to take a look at it, to continue to try to put applications in during that window and try to get in, and to take advantage of the offerings at the home school, because that's the next best thing to being actually on the Butler Tech campus. And that's really all I have for you tonight. I did bring you all marvelous editions of the newsletter to share with each other and with the students. And that's all I have.
Just a quick question. With the lottery system, is it an equal distribution for districts, or is it, if the odds fell favorably, you could have more than you typically have, and if they were on the other end of the spectrum, are there the opportunity that you could be iced out of opportunities?
Unfortunately, Chris, yeah, so it
Okay.
doesn't make it an even distribution among districts. It's strictly a lottery system. If your name is pulled, you get in. If it's not, but in terms of equity and inclusion, everybody gets the same opportunity.
Yeah.
I should say. Everybody gets the same opportunity, but there's pros and cons with the lottery, and that's the biggest con, and that's the most, if you will, people that express a little bit of disgruntledness with the lottery system is because, you know, it could be 20 people from Middletown and 0 from another district, but it's the most fair system that we have right now.
Are they collecting data on it?
They are collecting data, and so I think one of the things they're going to look at is the impact on the school, on the home schools. Like, because students aren't getting into the program, are they taking advantage of the home school? Are those numbers going up? We've got what I think, and I could be wrong, I want to say about 2 or 3 years data now. They just started the lottery system maybe
That's about right.
2 or 3 years ago. So they're still collecting it. It appears to be the most fair system that we're able to come up with at the time. But I do think Superintendent Graft is looking at taking a deep dive into the data to see if it's skewed in any way, or if there's any way we can shape it differently. But all the conversations that they have had, all of the other districts that are using it have agreed that the lottery system is the most fair in terms of equity and inclusion.
Number of applicants is pretty consistent in regards to prior lottery and now with the lottery, or
I'm not sure.
not sure? Okay.
This is an odd question, and you may not have an answer, but what are the top 2 or 3 programs that kids try to get into?
Welding is
Okay.
like
Welding's
number
big.
one.
Really?
That's the biggest,
Okay.
that's the biggest.
Which one?
Waiting.
Welding.
Oh,
244 students applied for welding this year. They had 75 spots.
Wow.
So
Okay.
welding continues to be the biggest. And I think on campus, there's a max of 1,230 students that they can serve on campus, and, 2,800 applicants.
yeah. So how do they resolve that?
They are building, snatching
They
up
are.
their, I mean, Butler Tech is really expanding at a fast rate. They just purchased the, what is it, the Vora Technical Campus.
Adjacent
Over
to
at
Miami,
Hamilton, Miami, yeah.
Yeah, those are just for Miami, for Hamilton students, unfortunately. No, that's not true, but
The menu.
they just entered into a program that Hamilton students, Middletown Community Foundation and Hamilton City Schools, I think, are supporting, and that is just for Hamilton students, unfortunately. But the Vora complex will be for Butler
Yeah.
County, for all of Butler County. But, they're building, really, they're expanding at a great rate with the intent and goal of just providing more opportunities for students and their adult education as well. So that's their single big goal, is to expand so that we can accommodate all of the students. That's the biggest, the biggest gripe that you hear is that students can't get in, and we're working very hard to expand.
Just for my curiosity, the wait list, is that random too? And so if you're on the wait list, I'm just trying to conceptualize,
still-
yeah,
is it-
because
do you
I think of a
still-
list is chronological. Where if it's purely random, then it would just be, I don't know, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
understand.
From my
it.
understanding, Chris, it is still based on a waiting list, so you're not, like, the next person doesn't automatically get in just because.
Because I'm thinking
Next
bingo
in
and numbers
line.
coming out of a bin, and so
Yeah.
I'm just.
And I don't think it's bingo, numbers
Yeah.
coming out of the bin, but I
That's-
think it's very similar to that. I
Yeah.
think it's I'm not real technical in how the system works, but it is literally just you go through a computer system, and if that student's name
Select.
pops up, they get in. It's not GPA based, so it doesn't matter, how well you're doing in school or how many extracurricular activities you participate in. It doesn't matter that you're the superintendent's son or next door neighbor's friend. It's literally, if your name pops up, you get in, and then you go through an interview process, and if, occasionally kids are like, I don't go for whatever reason, then that spot is opened up and it goes to the next
Okay,
person.
that makes sense.
So one thing I can say about Butler Tech, since we've started the Passport to Tomorrow program, and our students have been outside of the 4 walls of Middletown, Butler Tech has been an awesome partner with opening their doors. We have students in the elementary grades going down to Butler Tech on a regular basis. We have our 5th graders going down to see the cosmetology program. All of our 8th graders go now, whereas before we didn't have all 8th graders go. But just with that relationship, they've truly embraced
Yeah.
what we have going on at Middletown. But with that comes that our students they've fallen in love with Butler Tech, and they've gone down there multiple times. So when they hit high school, I really do foresee that it's possible that, we might have more applicants with Butler Tech.
And I think that's great. That's just like, it's great for the students to go and visit it, and the parents to go and visit it and just see what an amazing opportunity it is for the kids. Because a lot of times what the students are doing are waiting until they're like junior year, because in their
That's too
heads,
late.
2-year program or whatever, and then they can't get in. They've missed it. So I would strongly encourage parents even at the elementary age, to visit Butler Tech and to see what all the offerings are, and to know those application dates in that window, and just try to get in, and knowing that more opportunities are opening up.
Yeah.
It's just a process.
Thank you.
It's a great place.
Thank you. I
Thanks
miss
for
you
Lena.
guys. You're doing great work. though.
Thanks
you.
for coming.
You're welcome.
All right, next on the agenda, we have our Senior Director of Student Services, Ms. Suanna Davis, speaking to us and presenting on chronic absenteeism.
Great. So as Ms. Davis is coming forth to the podium, just want to build a little foundation here with our new Minutes Matter campaign and our chronic absenteeism campaign. Ms. Davis is going to share with you a little bit tonight, a high-level look at what we have in place when it comes to supports in our district, and then a little bit about the new campaign that has been rolled out in the district. I want to say it's been about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so take it away. Thanks, Ms. Davis.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Urso, Mrs. Scheibert, members of the board, Mrs. Hauser, and Mr. Bertram. Honored to be here tonight, certainly to talk about a topic very near and dear to my heart, as well as one that we're facing across the nation with chronic absenteeism. And so just to begin, so we're all, there we go. On the same page, there is a lot of misinformation out there, so I thought it might be best for us to start with what is chronic absenteeism, what is the definition of chronic absenteeism. For years we focused on truancy and unexcused absences. Chronic absenteeism takes a little bit different frame of an approach, and it reads, chronic absence is defined as missing 10% or greater of the total number of days enrolled during the school year for any reason. So we're looking at excused as well as unexcused absences in this definition, and it includes excused, unexcused, disciplinary, and parent note days. So this is a metric that the state of Ohio has moved to get a broader influence and understanding of the missed instructional time. And so at the core, this is truly about if students aren't in class, it's very difficult for them to learn and oftentimes difficult for them to fill those gaps. And so in a report released in October of 2023 by nonprofit Attendance Works, we're looking at a statistic across the nation of approximately 66% nationwide of chronic absenteeism. It is directly related to the pandemic and the lack of ability to bounce back from the pandemic in terms of attendance. So 66% nationwide is the metric for chronic absenteeism.
So 66% of American students from Pacific to Atlantic are missing more than 10% of the
Their
academic.
instructional
Correct. 10% of instructional time. In most districts, and certainly in ours, that equates to approximately 17 days a year. And in first semester in Middletown, that equated to the threshold for chronic absenteeism first semester was 52.65 hours. So that's 52.65 hours of missed instructional time triggered the threshold for chronic absenteeism. We talk about the impact. Every day is important in our classrooms. Our teachers are spending valuable time with students engaged in the learning process, and that is taken away when a student's not there. We also know that it's hard to replicate, and over time it compounds one on another, and those missed instructional hours start to create gaps that make it difficult for students to overcome the loss of learning. So when we talk about that emphasis on the conversation of chronic absenteeism as opposed to truancy, we really begin to talk about chronic absenteeism as we've already identified, counting all absences, and emphasizing the academic impact of missed days. But I draw your attention to that bottom bullet. It's the use of community-based positive strategies. In the truancy realm, we oftentimes hear the punitive aspects of attendance conversations, the fear-based, the compliance, the legal, the court system. As we look at chronic absenteeism with our Midi Minutes Matter campaign, we're looking at how we can leverage community-based internally and externally to truly start to talk about how we break down barriers for families. This is about truly partnering and walking side by side with families to help give them the resources to combat any barriers they may have to getting their children to school. We also know there are plenty of very valid reasons why students are absent from school. This is not about putting families in the hot seat. This is truly about embracing what the barriers are. We know that in our board policy, in JED, we have any number of reasons that are excused absences: a personal illness, a family illness, a religious holiday, a college visit. This is not about trying to eliminate all absences. This is trying to ensure that the barriers are removed so that kids can attend school. The statistic that we're working on from is the gap closing on the state report card. It's found in the state report card under gap closing. In the 22-23 school year for Middletown, we were sitting at 44.9%. So that is our baseline data of which we are trying to work from. That is certainly the goal that we're trying to bring down, that 44.9%. Again, we talked about nationwide 66%. So in terms of the nation, we're still well below what the national average is, but we have been slow to bounce back from COVID. Just to give you a point of reference, in the 18-19 school year, 2018-2019 school year, chronic absenteeism in Middletown was 23%. So we see the significant impact that the pandemic has had in terms of having the influence on being in school. Just to point out some highlights about why attendance matters, there's quite a bit of research out there. When we talk about the earlier grades, students who are chronically absent are less likely to read on grade level. There is a direct correlation between performance and attendance. In the middle school, we have students that are not proficient readers 4 times more likely to drop out of school. So again, it starts to compound over time. The longer that and more frequently that our students are not in school, the more barriers they face. In high school, a student who is chronically absent any year between 8 and 12 is 7 times more likely to drop out of school. And then finally, after graduation, a student who drops out of high school lives 9 less years than a college graduate. So we look at the entire continuum and spectrum of just how important attendance is and how it can affect from early grades all the way through adulthood. We're also hearing from our industry partners the importance of showing up. We consistently hear from our Ready 100 partners the emphasis that they see every day in their businesses on adult behavior, and we're trying to set the stage at a very young age that showing up is important across the board. So we talk about removing the barriers. We are very proud of all the areas that we are actively removing barriers already within our district. So we start with success liaisons. Success liaisons are in our schools. If you're not familiar, these are resources, individuals that partner directly with families. They are direct connects to support anywhere from getting rent, getting people connected with clothing, getting connected with food. And so we're talking about a direct removal of a barrier because these success liaisons are able to directly connect our families with resources. As we move around, school resource officers, not only the safety and security aspects of ensuring our students are safe when they come to school, removing that barrier, but also the immense amount of partnerships and bridges that they're able to build from a community standpoint into our schools on that daily basis. Attendance officers still play a role in that. In our top row, we have 3 of our attendance officers, Rod Puckett, Becky Sorrell, and Amy Blust. These individuals, when we talk about attendance officers, oftentimes that very negative connotation of the truancy aspect, but the beauty is these folks are able to very adequately advocate for our families. And we are trying everything in our power not to go the route of legal. That is the very last step that we pursue only when necessary, because we do want families to know that we're more worried about working with them and not using that fear-based approach. So that's another resource that we have embedded within our district as the attendance officers to work directly with families to help better understand. We're blessed with the school-based health clinic, so you see down in the left corner that Primary Health Solutions. We've removed a barrier of access to health care. And so we do allow the families to be transported, the students to be transported during the school day if necessary. So we remove that barrier to getting adequate health care if they're ill, which we have already identified is a very appropriate reason for a student to be absent if they're ill. And then community partnerships is probably one of our strongest areas. We have any number of community partners. This is just a sampling of them. We talk about Adopt a Class. the role of the adult mentors, the role of students being excited about businesses and partners coming into their classrooms. That could be the motivation they need and they want to be in school that day. Another one, Middletown Connect. If you go to that third level down, that third row, Chrissy Durish and many others helping us remove community barriers. So looking at our highest census tracts and truly engaging with the community to find out what are the barriers in the community that are keeping people from accessing any number of things. Laundry, safety, and really leveraging community resources to help get our kids to the schoolhouse door. Access mental health counseling, we do know a direct connection of coming out of the COVID pandemic is the youth mental health crisis. It is not lost on us that our ability to provide access counselors during the school day as a service to parents and families, again, helps to break down a possible barrier that might be keeping a child or a family from attending. And then another wonderful partner, our CBI RISE program, leveraging safety for our students after school in the community. It's another set of caring adults. And so again, if a parent has to work or has access to problems with their children being safe after school, these are phenomenal programs that are not only engaging from a safety standpoint, but absolutely empowering our students to just thrive. And then I'm very proud, Envision Partnerships, we are running a pilot right now at our middle school, and they are actually working with us in the juvenile courts to use a diversion program for students who have maybe started to look at truancy concerns. So again, trying to work away from that fear-based approach of legal consequences and really emphasizing that positive approach via that diversion program. Which brings us to our Midi-Minute Matters. So in taking all the foundation that we've spoke about, we really begin to look at how are we going to attack this in a very positive way. And so we looked at a four-prong approach. You might have seen this. This was originally appeared in the last Midi Monthly that went out in the end of January, beginning of February, where we really launched this campaign, just the awareness piece. So we talk about the emphasis on community engagement, outreach, data-driven solutions, and celebrations. So we really talk about that actively involvement from parents, guardians, educators, and community members, the outreach portion in terms of collaborating to create inclusive and supportive environments, the data-driven solutions, really beginning to look at identifying the patterns and getting at the core of the why so that we can adequately continue to put resources in place, and then finally celebrating. Are we doing enough to celebrate when our students are there? And across the board, our buildings are doing phenomenal jobs, but what can we as a district do to continue to help support that? And so you see just a few, these are just a couple of the engagement strategies we're using in each of these areas. This is not an exclusive list, just a very broad highlight. When we talk about community engagement, really truly getting at the root cause of the absences. You will continue to hear over the course of the next several months various ways that we are trying to truly identify what is the barrier. Not what we think the barrier is, what we believe, but truly engaging our families to determine what truly are the barriers that families are facing and how can we help. Encouraging and engaging the success liaison and the community agencies. They're already becoming more and more aware of this campaign. They're starting to ramp up their supports and they're starting to have more engagement, very anecdotally, just in terms of families reaching out. Our families are beginning to realize that there's nothing to be ashamed of, there's nothing to be scared of. They can truly partner with us. The next one down, outreach. We are in the process of revising our notification system for how we inform families that are absent that their child's not there. And part of that is the messaging, to be very inviting in terms of bringing them to the table if there's a barrier that we can help with, even that message that's going home from the school, evolving that, as well as diversifying the methods of delivery. So outside of just a phone call, we're looking at a multi-tiered approach in terms of notification of absence for families and the invitation to engage. We're creating individualized plans for the top 5% of students in every building. So our students that have hit the highest thresholds in every building will be bringing teams together to create individualized plans for each one of those students to engage those families one-on-one.
So top 5% of students who are missing?
The top 5 highest chronically absent.
Yeah.
Yes. The data-driven solutions, completion of a school and district self-assessment to, again, ensure that we're looking at all areas through a very clear lens in terms of our own self-assessment of our practices. And then a monthly review of chronic absenteeism data. That is occurring monthly with our principals. Just getting the data into their hands is a powerful tool that we are providing to them so that they are even aware down to the individual student level where their chronic absenteeism concerns are. And then finally, celebrating. The district-wide MIDI attendance incentive, we are very excited that today we kicked off the MIDI's attendance campaign. In every one of our classrooms across the district, you will find a poster like this. At the beginning of every day, if they have 100% attendance, meaning no tardies, no absences, they get to color in a letter. And when they've colored in all 7 letters, they will be rewarded with a donut party. And so this has been a great motivator for our principals to utilize. We obviously understand there are, again, very acceptable reasons why students are not in school. That's not the point of this. This is to be used as a motivator, not a detractor. And so these will be all across the district. And kicking off today, I'm looking forward to the very first donut party being awarded next Tuesday when they hit that 7th letter. So again, trying to approach it from a very motivating way. I will also say another very creative way that these have been discussed is in talking about the individual student plan. So some of our students who are at the highest thresholds, using a tool like this to even motivate them incrementally one day at a time so that it becomes a little more palatable. That 7 days is a totally different discussion than talking about 2-3 months. So looking at it incrementally. And then finally, positive emphasis on school attendance, not punitive. So even the way we welcome our students in after they've been absent potentially for a day or two, thank you for being here, welcome back, how are you? That positive adult relationship with our students is so critically important. And so really just philosophically shifting to absences being looked at from the standpoint of a barrier that's kept the child from being there, not a choice that a family's making to keep them home, and really trying to approach it from that standpoint. So in your packet, you just have a graphic of the MIDI attendance incentive posters. Again, these will be all over the district. And so we're very excited to see the donut parties roll in. We have made some tweaks for larger classes. As an example, if a classroom has over 30 students in it, they can divide in half. And so it's a little more attainable. At the end of the day, we want this to be an attainable goal. And so that is our whole goal in doing this district-wide. And we wanted something to bring the district together collectively. And so there's even starting to be a little bit of discussion amongst the principals about their own competitive nature of who can get the most donut parties. So a little bit of positive competition to help get our students to school. And then finally, this is our goal. Our goal for second semester is 65%. That would put us chronically absent at 35%. So it's bringing down approximately 10% from where we were. All the research says 8 to 12% is it with a concerted campaign. 8 to 12% is very doable. And so we've gone right in the middle, somewhat aggressively at 10% for second semester. So I framed this in a very positive way. If we compare this to the previous slide that said 44%, 44.9, we would be looking at 35% chronically absent, but I prefer to look at it in a very positive way that we're going to look at 65% not chronically absent for second semester district-wide. Questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So looking at your data for students that are chronically absent, is the data skewed in any particular direction if you were to look at whether or not these numbers are perhaps skewed more towards elementary or middle or high school, or is it more a broad kind of a scatter plot if you were to look at the numbers?
It's fairly broad. It's somewhat consistent, certainly in grades K through 6. We see quite a bit of consistency across the grades. And we did have principals in that data dive down to the specific grade levels as well, so that if they could begin to see great trends within particular grade levels. When we hit 7th, 8th, and 9th through 12th grade, we see some skewing of that data in the upper grades, but I would not say statistically it's not making a statistical effect in terms of skewing those numbers outside of the realm.
First off, thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the thoughtfulness that it appears that our district is addressing this issue. The national statistic, startling, 66%. Is there a way to unpack those numbers to comparable districts or districts that are in our region, or instead of so broadly, to understand better what a district like Middletown that is in the Midwest or something, where those numbers might look, and to understand just comparable? And then if it's such an issue throughout the country, have we been looking at what other districts are doing, and is a lot of this birthed from some of those ideas?
Interestingly enough, we tend to be ahead of the curve in terms of proactively addressing this. We're seeing quite a bit of media attention that has started probably since about September of 2023, where you're seeing quite a bit of emphasis on the national landscape in terms of through nonprofits, through media outlets, and through government agencies. We've seen very little conversation, certainly in this region, about actively combating chronic absenteeism. And so to that regard, we are a little bit ahead of the curve, which is a great place to be, except for not having a lot to draw from. There is a lot of research out there, and so we've been blessed with being able to look at a wide variety of different reports, whether it be the state of Ohio, the federal government. Several nonprofits have put out toolkits, and so we've been able to look at some of that. The problem with that is we're not seeing any efficacy data at this point, because these are really just workforce work group suggestions. So that answers the second part of your question. In answer to the first, we've done just some minor comparisons. We were able to find some statistics recently that we can look historically and across the state at the chronic absenteeism rate. So certainly that can be another part of our data dive, to really look at statistically how are we comparing. I know that recently it was brought to our attention a very comparable district is sitting in the mid-50s. And so not to say 44.9 is good, but in terms of just a very direct comparison with that particular district, we were in a much better spot in terms of the chronic absenteeism rate.
With the success liaisons being so intimately connected to families, do they collect data in regards to, or do they notice trends in terms of the factors that are impeding students from getting to school? Are there trends? Are there things that they've noticed? Because I would imagine, since they're connected with students that are not in school always, they would be a wealth of information at
We
times.
have not charged them with specifically collecting that data, and so while they may have some anecdotal type of data, our next phase of this project is to get very granular in terms of how can we get at the very root across the district of what these barriers are. We want to know, and so we'll leverage a lot of our different partners to begin to find that out. As I mentioned, as an example, Middletown Connect has identified with us some community barriers, but we have not specifically engaged our parents to know and gather their feedback as to what specifically they identify as the barriers to getting their children to school.
And not to hog the mic, but my last question would be around the health clinic. Is there data? I know it was launched a few years ago. We visited, or some of us had visited, some other clinics in our area and noticed that, I mean, they were busy and active in solving a lot of the health needs of their students. Have we noticed the same type of trends with our health clinic? Is it active? Do we have data in regards to how much service they provide? Yeah.
So we have asked them for that data. We are waiting on them to respond to our request for, again, specific data in terms of what the volume is of the number of students they are seeing. We actually asked for it for the entire last school year, and we asked for it delineated by individual student interaction. So we are waiting on them to respond to that request that we made probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago. So yes,
Great.
we've leveraged that data. We're just waiting to get it finalized.
Thank you.
Yeah. My first question is, you mentioned a district that's similar to ours with a little bit higher % of chronic absenteeism. Are districts experiencing the same drop in achievement connected with chronic absenteeism? Is that like across the board?
That's
Or
hard
do
to
you know
tell.
that?
We've started to do a deep dive on that direct connection, and I think there's some data that's forthcoming in regards to that. We certainly know that we are seeing a direct correlation, and so I can't speak to if we've not done that kind of a deep dive. We're starting with our own internal data, and we are seeing a direct correlation.
And my second question, and this really isn't directly have to do with this, but it seems like anything that goes wrong now, people go, well, it was the COVID years. But nobody can tell me exactly what, like, as a carryover. I knew that within that first year when people started coming back, I realized that some people were afraid to send their children back, but we're past that now. What are some of the things that the COVID business would still cause in absenteeism? Do you have any idea?
The research is telling us that some of it is just the disruption of the educational model. So
Okay.
Yeah.
with the disruption of the educational model that took place from hybrid to virtual to, it just got people out of the routine of what school is. I think you can factor in any number of other things that maybe have prevented the bounce back in terms of the fears about safety and well-being and health and those types of things. You know, it is a nationwide problem, and I would go so far as to say I don't think it's strictly related to school attendance. I mean, we're seeing it across all industries in terms of a very direct correlation to the COVID times, to your, you know, and attendance across the board, adult attendance, employee attendance, when we talk about the workforce. And so, you know, there's quite a bit of research going on right now, but in the education realm, one of the big pieces that they point to was the disruption of the traditional educational model. It just got people out of the routine, and it became easy for some people to really lean into the barriers.
Okay. That makes sense.
Just one other question about the model itself. I see you mentioned the internal, external stakeholders. One piece in the model, just curious why there isn't an additional emphasis on academic barriers, and maybe you're already doing that, it's just not represented in the model, but I was just curious if you could just explain a little bit more about the academic barriers that students may face and how that relates to chronic absenteeism.
I'm sorry, are we talking about the graphic?
Yeah, where it says removing barriers.
Yeah, well, we are hitting the academic realm in so many areas, and so it is absolutely a conversation that maybe is happening a little more when we're talking about the academic realm and the barriers to academics. Really, the concern we have with this is it's compounding the academic barriers. And so our hope is that by leveraging some of these resources, we can begin to actively combat the academic barriers, because again, the missed instructional time, the not being in the classroom where the teacher, we know, plays such a crucial role in the education of our students. And if they're not there, they're missing that interaction with the teacher. But we could certainly talk about adding academic barriers to this so it doesn't fall off of our radar in terms of the direct impact.
And one last question. I know that in terms of, this is kind of an administrative kind of policy question, but in terms of us being able to move our gap closure by doing better in this particular area, is that done on a yearly basis where we'd have to meet a certain threshold for us to get that point value for gap closure from the administrator? Is that a yearly number?
Yes,
Okay.
this is a component of the gap closing portion of the report card, so it is part of the yearly metric
Okay.
that we will be measured against.
And that goal to hit that, what's the number that we're looking at? I know
20, well, our goal is to look at 35.
Okay, and incrementally
35
move
chronically
towards
absent,
that.
65 not chronically absent. That will not get us to the state goal,
Right.
but it's an incremental goal
Right, okay.
to help us incrementally get closer.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question as a mom and a parent. I think, you know, the incentives that you guys are trying to do sounds really great, and the poster that you guys have sounds great. Now, am I correct in saying that it's for the whole classroom, right? So if the whole classroom shows up that day, they color in a letter, correct?
Correct.
My only worry on that, and, you know, I hope you can, you know, ease that, is how will we stop the potential for increasing the bullying in the schools?
And we've had conversations with principals about that. I think it really talks about really focusing on that positive aspect of attendance. And so reinforcing that there are very valid reasons for students to not be in school. And when that student has returned from an absence, that we're welcoming them back into the learning environment. It's a very positive. And so very deliberately being in tune with making sure students aren't starting to point fingers or those types of things, that it becomes a motivating factor, not something to point fingers at. So we have had those conversations to be very deliberate about how do we welcome students back into the learning environment.
Okay.
We all good? Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Ms. Davis. That was a dynamite job. And as Susanna was saying, we are gathering data as we speak when it comes to looking at chronic absenteeism and performance in the classroom, which we should have that ready by our time together on Thursday to share that. And also, I'd like to say, and as Susanna said, we are just starting. I mean, we've really just ramped this up. So we're still in the stages of building the awareness, doing the research, doing the data dives, but we are definitely on our way when it comes to identifying some barriers when it comes to chronic absenteeism. So thank you so much, Ms. Davis.
And Ms. Hauser, I noticed that you were part of a group that had met on this topic, and so it's nice to know that we're intimately involved.
On
It's a big-
LinkedIn Live, yep, but it's across the country, right?
Well, this brings us to our consent agenda for this evening. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Todd. And a second, please.
Second?
Thank you. Questions, comments, things to highlight within tonight's consent agenda? Mr. Bertram, any financial things of note?
I just have another update on amended appropriations. We had 3 grants that we received the carryover in, so I had to increase the appropriation amounts for those. And that also includes a modified certificate of estimated resources as well.
Any questions prior to voting? All right, then, Mr. Bertram.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shiver?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
And Mrs. Snow?
Yes.
Under finance this evening, we have one action item. It's a fair school funding plan. And Mr. Bertram, it appears that you're the point person on that. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second, please.
Second?
Mr. Bertram, could you provide us some insight on this?
I'd be happy to. This is the fair school funding. As you know, we had a group of superintendents, treasurers, and 2 legislators that worked 3 years to get the fair funding model changed. I mean, a huge change in the way we fund kids, where we're able to identify what it actually costs to educate a student and to get it passed through the House, Senate, and the governor. And we are currently in phase 2 of that. At this point, the committee that had worked together to get this done, they used a lot of resources, pro bono resources, through friendly organizations that are vendors throughout the state to help bring the data together to be able to form this model. And what they're asking now at this point is they want to be able to continue that, but they don't see it working well without some type of revenue, some type of budget to be able to do that. All these vendors that have worked for nothing for, 5 years now, with the 3 years to get it approved, then additional 2 years, plus now the new biennium budget. They're hoping to get about $200,000 a year, if not more, to be able to continue this program. And what that money is going to be used for is marketing, research, consultants when needed, data development, economic studies, and a staff of 1. So they're not asking for a lot, they're just asking for something to be able to continue to keep the process alive and to keep it in front of the legislators to know the value that is needed for the school districts. And, we are a very large recipient of the gains from fair school funding. Yeah, I had mentioned before, the old formula model, we were underfunded about $14.5 million per year, according to the model that had been approved for many years. This is actually getting us caught up from that shortfall that we've gained. And they're only asking for 30 cents per student, so it's a nominal fee on our behalf, $1,700, I believe I have. And I would recommend that the school board go ahead and approve this on our behalf so we can continue to advocate on our behalf and our students.
Just a point of clarification, the last line is cost will be $30 per student count. Is that 30 cents per student count, or is it
It's
student?
30 cents per student.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
$30, I'm sorry.
Is it $30 a
It's
student?
$1,760.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, is student count like a grouping of students?
It's
Not
our enrolled students, 5,800 students. So it's 30 cents, 5,800, 30 cents, $1,700.
Okay, that makes sense now. Questions for Mr. Bertram? I appreciate the description and explanation. I think we're ready to vote.
All right, fantastic. Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Mrs. Snow?
Yes.
And Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Under Human Resources, we have a job description. It's read-only for this evening. It's a tutoring position. Ms. Hauser, are you going to
Sure,
provide some?
yep, I sure will. So this is in our K through 6 program. What you see in front of you tonight is a tutor job description. Currently, we have 2 tutor titles per se, an EL tutor and a reading tutor. Starting next year, a tutor will be a tutor will be a tutor. So we'll be servicing children based on need, and it won't be title. So what you see is we've taken our EL tutor description and our reading tutor description, and we've brought them together to combine those responsibilities. In their original state, they're pretty much the same. You know, they've come together. We have with still the same amount of days, still the same pay, just a different job description, pulling those job duties together. And that starts next school year.
Any questions regarding this? All right, I assume this will be on the agenda.
Correct, for adoption.
This brings us right to committee reports. Ms. Hauser, any committees for?
No, we didn't have
meet?
policy and we didn't have DLT, so we're good.
Nothing to
This time.
report. We already had Ms. Stewart provide us with a detailed description of Butler Tech. Well, that brings us to Board of Education board reports. And Ms. Snow, anything to report this evening?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No comments this evening.
Oh, we're cruising. Ms. Mulligan?
No, nothing.
Nothing? Ms. Scheifert's going to mess this up.
No, Ms. Sharbert's not.
Well, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to wish our basketball team good luck when they play tomorrow night at Princeton against Western Hills. They play Western Hills. It'll be a good game. Our team's done well. I think they won their first game by a decent margin. They had a really good second half and pulled away. So we're really rooting on. I think they have a chance to win a few games and make it interesting. Congratulate, I think, our men's bowling team placed for the next layer of the state tournament. And I believe we have one young lady that qualified for, I always confuse sectionals, regionals, whatever the next layer past this.
She's moving on up.
She's moving on
Yeah.
onto that. And so congratulate the bowling team and our basketball team.
I am gonna
You
mess
remembered
up.
something.
I do.
Did you?
I want to congratulate the basketball team and the coaches for the honor they gave to that little Luke Atkinson.
Yes.
Those are the kind of stories, and then it made the national
National
news.
news.
Those are the kind of stories that always make me think a school district is doing the right thing when that kind of stuff happens. I mean, for all the garbage that goes on day after day, when you see something like that, to make a child say it was the best day of my life. I don't even have the words, but it made me feel so happy to be a part of this system, that kind
That was pretty
that
cool.
kind of an event would go on. And I just thank all the people that made that possible.
Luke is a nice
Pretty
young man.
impressive.
He
Yeah.
works with the
He is,
soccer
isn't he?
team, and,
Yeah.
and my son Evan really enjoys him, and nice family, and thank you
Yeah.
for mentioning
Yeah.
that.
Randy
Mr. Bertram?
I would just like to say to Susanna, wonderful presentation, and I'm hoping you bust the budget on the donut fund.
You good? Hey, tomorrow's a big day at the high school. So as I see you chuckling over there, Ms. Thompson. It is a big day. It is. So tomorrow, and this is all part of our high school redesign and our piloting when it comes to experiential learning. So tomorrow is the day that all of our 11th graders take their ACT test. So always in the past, we've always wanted to plan something for people not testing, our children not testing. Well, this year, just in that experiential mindset, tomorrow all of our 9th graders will be traveling to the Air Force Museum. All of our 10th graders are going on college visits, and all of our 12th graders are going to visit our business partners out in the community. So to take that a step farther, which is even more impressive with the 12th graders, they are matched up with businesses where they could possibly land a summertime job. So that's taking place tomorrow. So we definitely have you on our thoughts, because that took quite a village to pull that off, the logistics. But everything, I would say, everything you guys are learning that's going in behind what's happening tomorrow will definitely play a part from this point forward with our high school redesign. So good luck. Can't wait to see the pictures from that tomorrow. And then also we had our personalized learning day last week, and I'm super proud that each personalized learning day gets better. They get better each time. It's like it's just taken a little bit of time for the personalized learning day to catch on, but I'd like to say, just point out all of our business partners that opened their doors so our families could go in and visit the businesses to see what they're all about. But really one of the standouts was here at the city building. We had 150 children, that's not their adults, 150 children in the city building on Tuesday the 20th, and each department in the city building had a display. So the buildings department had their blueprints out, and they talked about what they did in the city building department. The parks department, they had an opportunity for families to give them feedback about what they'd like to see in the parks, with that going on. The police department did fingerprints. So everybody did a little bit of something here in the city building, but it was truly exciting to see all of the students and their families here in the city building participating in that. So hats off to everyone. That's also a logistics wizardry to pull something like that off. So hats off to everyone that, each personalized learning day, the work that goes in behind that. And that's all I have.
With that, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved?
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Good night.